A flourishing rookie against a potential MVP, a savvy vet against a guy who caught fire this season, as well as a battle between two great running backs. This is the wild card round of the 2024 NFL playoffs, and it's time to take a look at each of these games as several incredible teams from each conference battle it out. So I'll preview every one of these matchups and why I'm excited about some of them in particular right after. Alright, the wild card round kicks off Saturday afternoon with the 4-seed Texans hosting the 5-seed Chargers. The Texans are coming off a win against the Titans, even though they rested most of their starters for a majority of the game. So call it a nice bounce-back win after they lost to the Chiefs in Week 16 and then got annihilated on Christmas Day by the Ravens. Meanwhile, the Chargers are feeling themselves a little bit, coming off of 3 straight wins in which their offense averaged 36 points per game during that span. The Texans have had their fair share of struggles this season, but their defense has been their strength. They've given up nearly 22 points per game, which is ranked 14th in terms of points allowed, but they give up the 6th fewest amount of yards, and they are tied for the 4th most sacks in the league. And I really think this game is going to come down to who can generate more pressure on the opposing QB and disrupt the timing of the other team's offense. Justin Herbert has taken the 7th most sacks of any quarterback this year, so you already know Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson will have their ears pinned back all game. The same goes for the Chargers pass rush as well, though. The Texans O-line, particularly the interior, has been in shambles this entire season, and they have not been able to get it fixed. CJ Stroud has taken the 2nd most sacks in the league this year behind only Caleb Williams. Meanwhile, LA has only 3 less sacks than Houston with 46, and they're most certainly going to be coming after CJ Stroud all game long. It's been a bit of a surprising season from CJ Stroud and the Texans offense, specifically the aerial attack. They went from averaging 245 passing yards per game last year, which was 7th best, to now just 207 per game, which is now 19th best, so slightly below average. Now, they did go a stretch without Nico Collins. They also lost Stephon Diggs for the season with a torn ACL, and now most recently, they also lost Tank Dell for the season with a knee injury against the Kansas City Chiefs. So they aren't firing on all cylinders, but watch out for Joe Mixon, because this man has 309 receiving yards plus over 1,000 more on the ground and 12 total touchdowns. Let's be honest, though, the real reason the Texans are even in the playoffs is because they play in one of the weakest divisions in all of football. They are the only team with a winning record in their division, similar to the Buffalo Bills in their division, but the Bills are obviously a much better unit, more of a powerhouse, if I'm going to be honest. And if you take a look at Houston's schedule and glance at their wins, the only team with a winning record that they've beaten was the Bills. Ironically, the Bills back in Week 5. That was that weird game where Josh Allen looked like he got knocked out, but somehow was able to return and finish out the game. Other than that, anytime they've played a team with a winning record, it has not gone well for them. They ended the year with a 1-5 record against winning teams with a minus 66 point differential in those games. And that's why I'm taking the Chargers in this one. Not only is their defense elite and they give up the fewest points per game, but their offense has been on fire lately. Then J.K. Dobbins is looking strong. That's their running back 1 since returning from IR, and they're playing their best football at the right time. Then after that game on Saturday, we get to kick back, relax, and watch the Ravens most likely curb stomp the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers got them earlier on in the year, but when they played most recently in Week 16, the Ravens decimated them 34-17. Coaches and players always talk about playing your best ball in December going into the playoffs, and that is not what the Steelers are currently doing. In fact, they've lost 4 straight with a point differential of -50 throughout those games. Meanwhile, the Ravens, they've won 4 straight with a plus 92 point differential in that span. To be fair, they've played teams like the Giants, Steelers, Texans, and Browns. Obviously, 2 of those are playoff teams, but the Giants and Browns, not good. Either way, the Ravens are looking great at the right time. Now, the Steelers' 8th ranked scoring defense looks nice at first glance, but when you realize they've given up 27 points per game over their last 6, they've clearly been struggling not only on defense, but on both sides of the ball. Lamar Jackson is the favorite to win what would be his 3rd MVP award, and even if you somehow manage to contain him, you still have to worry about Derrick Henry, who just rushed for over 1,700 yards in the regular season and plays his best ball oftentimes in the playoffs. There's a reason why they're 3rd in scoring and 1st in yards. They're likely going to need some receiver help or some pass catchers in general to step up in this one because it's not looking likely that their wide receiver one, Zay Flowers, is going to play. He sadly went down with a knee injury last week against the Cleveland Browns and hasn't practiced at least early on during the week. So he's, at least as of right now, trending towards not playing. Even if he does manage to play, he's not going to be 100% out there, and that is obviously not the best sign, especially since they play on Saturday. Even if Zay Flowers can't go, though, there's still tight ends Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, plus wideouts Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar. Running back Justice Hill is the next receiving option from a season-long standpoint, so you can't sleep on him either. Therefore, look for Baltimore to build up a lead that will be too difficult for Pittsburgh to overcome, then milk the clock with the run game. The Steelers really aren't built to play from behind, even though Russell Wilson loves to throw some deep balls to George Pickens. More on him in a second. The Steelers offense, at least over the course of the season, they rank 27th in passing yards per game, which makes it pretty tough to hang around if this game turns into a shootout. And yeah, the Ravens defense has struggled at times this season, especially their pass defense, but they've given up just 11 points a game to their last 4 opponents, which is elite. And if George Pickens has a showing like he did last week, where he caught 1 pass on 6 targets for goose egg yards, the Ravens are going to feast. They are favored by 10 points for a reason, and that's why I think Baltimore wins this one pretty convincingly. Next up, the 7-seed Broncos travel to Buffalo to take on the 2-seed Bills. Bo Nix has definitely exceeded everyone's expectations this year. He's a solid dual-threat QB with a great pass-catching option in Cortland Sutton, but they are playing in one of the most hostile stadiums in the NFL against a team that you have to score a ton of points against in order to win, and that's not the most ideal situation for your rookie quarterback. And look, I know I'm a Chiefs fan, so I might sound like a Broncos hater, but if you remove last week's game where they beat the Chiefs JV squad, including a linebacker that they signed 6 days prior that played 25 snaps on defense, absolutely unreal. But if you remove that game, the Broncos are 2-7 against teams with a winning record and 7-0 against teams with a losing record. Well, the Bills just so happen to be a team with a winning record, one of the best winning records in the league at 13-4, and it probably would have been 14-3 had they played their starters last week. So this is not going to be easy. I will give Denver credit. Their defense has consistently been one of the best in the league throughout the year, ranking 3rd in points allowed and 7th in yards allowed. The strength of their defense is by far their pass rush. They finished the regular season with 63 sacks, which was the most in the league by far and tied for the 14th most of any team in NFL history. The problem is the Bills have allowed just 14 sacks this season, easily the least, and 8 less than the Packers, who are second. Josh Allen is quite honestly incredible at avoiding sacks. He's having an MVP type of season and heads up one of the most explosive offenses in the league that average over 30 points per game. The one advantage the Broncos have on teams, pressure and sacks, just so happens to be the thing the Bills are best at countering out of any team in the NFL. So give me the Bills in this one, and honestly, they should win this game by more than 1 score. Crazier things have happened though, so obviously we'll find out one way or another here very soon, but if I had to put money down on it, I'm going to go with the Buffalo Bills. Now let's flip over to the NFC, because after the Bills and Broncos game, we get the 2-seed Eagles hosting the 7-seed Packers. These teams did play week 1 in Brazil, if you remember, a eon lifetime ago, however the phrase goes, and the Eagles got the narrow victory while Jordan Love exited late in that game with an MCL injury that he had to work through for weeks after that. And he might not be 100% in this game either, because last week against the Bears, he exited the game with an elbow injury and said that his throwing hand went numb, which is obviously not great. However, I think it was just a good old smack on the funny bone, and he was held out more as a precaution. He might not be 100% in this one, but I personally think he should be pretty close and good to go. Love himself told the media he'll be good to go this week, which makes sense, but unfortunately he will for sure be without one of his best receivers, as Christian Watson tore his ACL last week in that game against Chicago. The Packers have lost back-to-back games by a score of 2 points, and that combined with the injuries is a tough way to head into the postseason. Meanwhile, the Eagles are one of the hottest teams in football right now. They've only lost 1 of their last 13 games, and that was against the Commanders in Week 16 when Jalen Hurts left the game with a concussion in the first quarter. He hasn't played or practiced since then, but finally practiced today for the first time, so he looks to be on track to play this week, which is much needed and some very good news for Philly and their fans. Assuming Hurts is no longer hurt and does play, I think the Eagles should take care of the Packers at home in this one. Hopefully the numbness in Love's hand fully returns and he's good to go, but regardless, being down Christian Watson does hurt. Plus, Philly is giving up the second fewest points this season and the fewest yards. Their defense is legit, and so is their running game that averages the second most rushing yards per game behind Saquon Barkley, who you could make a legitimate argue for as MVP of this entire season. That just so happens to be the Packers' strength on offense as well, though. Josh Jacobs has been a workhorse for them in his first season in Green Bay, and they're gaining the fifth most rushing yards per game on the year. I think a large part of this game is going to come down to who can more effectively stop the run. Both defenses have been solid at that this season. The Packers are ranked 7th against the run, while the Eagles are 10th. I just think Philly is too dynamic for the Packers to keep up with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, especially since their top corner, talking about the Packers, Jair Alexander, is out for the season with a knee injury. Hurts needs to be careful, though, because for what it's worth, the Packers have 31 takeaways on the year, which is among the best in the business. The next game might be the hardest one to predict of the entire weekend, though, so let's get into it. Bucs Commanders. They played all the way back in week 1, with Tampa handing them a 17-point loss, but that was Jaden Daniels' first ever NFL start. Since then, he's taken the league by storm and led the Commanders to a 12-5 record after going 4-13 last year. The Bucs have a pretty exciting quarterback on their squad as well, though. Baker Mayfield. He's finished 3rd in passing yards and 2nd in passing touchdowns on the season. These teams are actually very similar in a lot of ways. Both of them have top 5 to top 10 offenses, while their defenses are more middle of the pack. However, there is one advantage that Tampa has, and I think it's going to be the key factor in this game. Washington has been much improved against the pass this season, but their run defense has been amongst the worst in the league, giving up over 137 yards per game, which is 3rd most. That plays right into the Bucs' hands, who, after ranking dead last in rush yards per game last season, are now rushing for over 150 yards a contest this year, which is 3rd most. That's going to be the key in this one for me. If they can control the game on the ground with Bucky Irving and Rashad White and keep their defense off the field, I think they should walk away with the dub. Irving is having a fantastic season with over 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 11 touchdowns by the conclusion of the regular season. So you can't sleep on him, Bucky, or the savvy vet in the air, Mike Evans, who has 11 scores on the year himself and just notched his 11th consecutive season with at least 1,000 receiving yards. Something I can't wait to see in this one is the highly anticipated matchup of Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore. The obvious part of the reason why is they do not like each other one bit. However, Lattimore has been dealing with a nagging hamstring injury that's kept him out of the last 2 games, but he is expected to be back out there on Sunday, and that's a matchup I can't wait. One of Baker's other go-to pass catchers and tight end Cade Otton missed the final 3 games with a knee issue, but Todd Bowles said he's trending in the right direction to play for this game, which would definitely be a welcomed addition. Another addition on the defensive side of the ball for the Bucs is going to be star safety Antoine Winfield. He appears to be trending in the direction of making his return after missing 4 games with a knee issue himself. They will need all the help they can get when it comes to Jaden Daniels, Scary Terry, and the offensive side of the ball over there with the Commanders. But overall, I'm rolling with the Bucs getting it done over the rookie Jaden Daniels in his playoff debut. If Daniels goes nuclear, though, using both his legs and his arm as the dual threat QB he is, it is definitely possible they can win this one. And finally, the 5-seed Vikings travel to LA to take on the 4-seed Rams on Monday night. At least that's where they are scheduled to play as of right now, but the wildfires going on in California at the moment could make things tricky. So thoughts and prayers up to that whole community and that whole area because it is wild. But the Rams Stadium is about 10 to 20 miles away from 2 separate fires that, at least as of when I'm recording this video around 3 p.m. on Wednesday, are 0% contained according to the LA County Fire Department. Ultimately, it's going to be the NFL's decision on whether they reschedule or play elsewhere. I would imagine they just opt to play elsewhere if push comes to shove. We don't have any updates at the moment yet, but we could see something later in the week as we get closer to Monday. And actually, right before we were going to export this video, the NFL released a statement about these fires in LA, saying the priority is the safety of the LA community, and basically said, In this instance, if they had to move the game, it would be played on Monday night at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona, if necessary. But let's talk about the game itself. Minnesota is licking their wounds after the beatdown they received from the Lions on Sunday Night Football. Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts out there. Casper, in particular, playing one of his worst games of the season as the Vikings went 0 for 4 in the red zone and failed to score a single touchdown. It's really hard to feel confident in Sam Darnold in a playoff game after watching that performance, especially when he's going up against quite the experienced veteran in Matt Stafford, who has proven that he can rise to the occasion and even won a Super Bowl just a few years ago. These two teams actually met earlier in the year during Week 8 on Thursday Night Football. It was the game that ended in that controversial no call on what should have been a face mask near the end zone on Sam Darnold, but the Rams really had that game won well before that. LA beat them 30-20 at home with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp feasting in that game, and that is something that you need to watch out for on this one as well. These coaching staffs know each other quite well. Kevin O'Connell was Sean McVay's offensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl in 2022, so there's certainly some familiarity there, and I know the Vikings have had an incredible season, blowing everyone's expectations out of the water by winning 14 games, and it's pretty nuts that they are the 5 seed as a 14-3 team. However, this one is going to be on the shoulders of Sam Darnold. Can he shake off that subpar performance this week and kind of be who he has been throughout the season as a whole? If he can, then it's anybody's ball game in theory. If the game gets close near the end and it's more of a shootout down to the wire, I'm not sure Darnold will be able to outduel Stafford and the Rams offense, and you really have to tip your cap to that team. They had all kinds of injuries to start the year. They came out the gate 1-4, but they went 9-2 in their next 11 games. And that's excluding last week's game against Seattle when they didn't even play their starters. So they're going to be well rested after sitting guys last week as well. Another added benefit. LA will be without their rookie running back Blake Corum, who fractured his forearm last week. But of course, they still have Kyron Williams on the ground, plus the incredible 1-2 threat of Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp in the air. Then their right tackle Rob Havenstein is expected to make his return after missing the last 2 games with a banged up shoulder. Other than that, both teams are pretty healthy aside from guys they may have lost to season-ending injuries earlier on in the season. All in all, I think it should be a good game, but at the end of the day, if it's close, again, I think Matt Stafford is the one that rises to the occasion and gets that W. Sam Darnold could certainly prove me wrong, though. He's played great this year, aside from last week, and if he can forget about that performance, he has the supporting cast to be able to pull off the W. Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, the list is more than solid, especially with KOC calling the plays. This is the playoffs, though, and single-round elimination could be anybody's game on any given day. That's what makes the playoffs so exciting and why I cannot wait for Wild Card Weekend. With that, you guys got to let me know which teams you think come out on top in the comments down below, and I'll see y'all next time.